The Amphoreus chapter has finally come to a close. The journey was long, the ending bittersweet, and truth be told, it's a bit tough to say goodbye. But with the train refueled and the junior members now technically becoming the senior ones, we can finally start thinking about our next destination. Will it be an overpopulated world of abundance, a depressing planet of nihility, or maybe a location protected by the preservation? Well, that's what we're here to discuss. The next stop on the Astro Express's cosmic journey. Before I get started, this video will be discussing topics that are revealed only at the epilogue of the 3.7 story. So while it doesn't technically spoil the main story, it might still be something you want to experience for yourself, so consider this your obligatory spoiler warning. Now, at the conclusion of the Amphoreus story, we catch up with some of the allies who helped us throughout the Iron Tomb crisis. Some thanked us for saving the universe, while others expressed their admiration of our feats. While most of them were relieved that destruction was averted, there was one character that made a rather surprising appearance. On the Astro Express, we see a conversation between Boothill and Rappa. Being the quick-witted Galaxy Ranger that he is, Boothill immediately realizes that the person he was speaking to wasn't actually his compadre, but instead Sparkle, the masked fool. When asked, Sparkle mentions that despite having no interest in Iron Tomb, she actually came all the way here to help look for the Trailblazer and Dan Heng, who were lost in space after the battle. She claims that Boothill has no reason to feel alarmed, as the Trailblazer and Dan Heng were her two prize actors, and in her next script, the Trailblazer will be the one to get the spotlight. Now, these offhanded comments might suggest that the next story is related to elation. I can't tell you how much I want to believe this, but the issue is that Sparkle hasn't been the most reliable person in the past. This isn't the first time she has appeared at the end of a major plotline hinting this and that, only for those hints to end up misleading us. Her penchant for theatrics and her reputation as a masked fool makes her really difficult to trust. The woman is a literal red herring brought to life. If it were only hints from Sparkle, the smart move would be to not trust any of it. The thing is, this might not be the only clue pointing us towards elation. After the threat of Iron Tomb was dealt with, we hear some updates from the IPC broadcast system. They mentioned that preparations for an event referred to as the Lunament Festival are currently underway. This particular event happens to be established by the Aeon of Elation, AHA. The location of this event was also revealed and is a planet called Benzai Tengoku. The word seems like an amalgamation of Benzaiten and Tengoku, which might hint at this location being a supposed heaven for music and arts, something often associated with the Fools. Aside from that, in the recent Myriad Celestia trailer that involved the Stellaron Hunters, a few alternative futures were shown. One of them showed the Nameless traveling to a place related to AHA. Of course, this was a planet controlled by the Morning Actors and not the Masked Fools, but nevertheless, this alternate future still involved the elation. So even if we take Sparkle out of the equation, quite a few things point us in the direction of AHA's path. There is an elation-related event being organized, a planet that seems perfect for the Fools, and an alternative future that involves AHA. On top of that, amongst all the chaos happening in the last two storylines, other Fools have seemingly been making moves as well. In Penacony, Sampo was shown to have been working alongside Sparkle to reacquire his mask. When Sparkle asked him why he was doing this, he provided no answer, but she speculated that it might be related to Belobog facing a crisis in the near future. This crisis might actually have been Iron Tomb since we know even Belobog was affected, but what if it goes beyond that? Perhaps Sampo knows the Trailblazer will come into contact with AHA in the near future, and this is why he has chosen to regain his old powers. I have long suspected that he is an emanator of AHA, so he might be preparing for the Trailblazer's run-in with the Aeon of Elation. The next part of the story focusing on elation might also be a conscious choice to switch the tone of the story. Amphoreus was overall rather depressing. I mean, yes, we did win at the end, but many of the main characters had to go through a tremendous amount of suffering only for it to end in a rather bittersweet way. So perhaps for the next story, the devs want a more lighthearted and silly storyline. If that's the case, what better option is there than a story centered around the Aeon of Elation? Though knowing AHA, the story may start off with an arts and culture festival only for it to devolve into intergalactic Squid Games. Aside from lore reasons, there may be other hints that are related to gameplay. We recently had the Try Not to Laugh event where special mechanics for certain characters were introduced. Most of these characters had buffed up versions of their follow-up attacks, and Sampo even had the ability to trigger other characters' special moves. Perhaps this event was actually a testing ground for them to try out new mechanics that elation characters might get. I mean, in the simulated universe, the elation path focuses a lot on follow-up attacks, so maybe that would end up being the path's main gimmick. Also, can you guess who was recently added into the 5-star shop? Yeah, it was Topaz and Nambi, who are coincidentally one of the few buffers for follow-up attacks. Now, why would they give Topaz for essentially free right before 4.0? Could it be because 4.0 will have a bunch of new follow-up attack elation characters? That can't be a coincidence, right? So clearly there's a few hints pointing us in the direction of elation, but I might just be incredibly biased here. Elation and its characters are some of my favorites in both lore and gameplay, so I have a vested interest here in this coming true. But it could be any of the other paths or factions, so to be fair, let's briefly explore those as well. Most of the time, the playable path the main character gets is tied to the story itself. In Belobog, many of their citizens follow the Aeon of Preservation, and that's where the main character unlocked their pointy stick of destiny. In Penacony, it was a fight between the Harmony and the Order, and we saw the main character get the feathered hat of Dance from Shippei to combat Enna's rules. And in Amphoreus, where the main focus was on Remembrance, the main character gained the pink pen of Fate. So playable paths are often directly tied to the narrative of the main story, though there are exceptions. Of the 12 or so paths we have, 8 are currently playable, and of those 8, the Trailblazer already has access to 4 of them. Destruction, Preservation, Harmony, and Remembrance are all playable, which leaves the Hunt, Erudition, Nihility, and Abundance. So perhaps the next storyline will focus on one of these 4 paths. The Hunt, for example, seems like a rather strong contender given all the stuff that has been happening in the background. Jingliu is presenting her God Killer plan, the generals are even more active than before, and there was even an alternate future related to them in the Myriad Celestia trailer. Now, you might say, well, the story involving the Shanzhou Alliance have always been sporadic. They only appear periodically in between major stories and haven't been a main focus since Fentilia sneaked onto the Luofu. If this were the case, then it's unlikely that we will get anything related to the Hunt anytime soon. Well, that's only true if we consider only the Xianzhou, but the Hunt does have another faction that follows them, the Galaxy Rangers. In the 3.7 ending, where we see Boothill speak to Sparkle, she did sort of hint at Boothill's true purpose for being there, which was to look for their currently missing leader. Perhaps much like Black Swan, Boothill might end up convincing the Nameless to help the Rangers search for their leader, given they now kinda owe them for rescuing the Trailblazer and Dan Heng. So if the Hunt storyline were to follow the Galaxy Rangers instead of the Xianzhou Alliance, then we might actually get a Hunt MC and storyline. Like I mentioned earlier, Sparkle is the embodiment of a red herring, so maybe her appearance and all these other clues was just to distract us from the real next story, which is related to the Hunt and the Rangers. Now, if the Shanzhou Alliance are not going to be the main focus in 4.0, then the Abundance is likely not going to be involved either. They are mortal enemies and practically attached at the hip, so it'll be tough to imagine a story where the Abundance are involved but not the Xianzhou. That said, given my awful luck with trying to get Hyacinth, if we could get a healer Trailblazer, I wouldn't really complain. The third possibility is Erudition. While they weren't the main focus in Amphoreus, they were quite involved. Noose themselves appeared and spoke to the Trailblazer, 3 geniuses were physically present in the story, and even the other geniuses appeared as well. There was also that little chat between Lygus and Scrulum involving Adlivun and some secret weapon Zenda had stashed there. So maybe the next story could involve us working with Skrullum, visiting their planet, and seeing the Trailblazer becoming a super genius once they unlock this path. It might also be quite easy to continue the storyline given how important Erudition was to Amphoreus. That said, with what was revealed in Amphoreus, Noose may only appear at critical junctures in the story as they seem to only power on when the universe gets closer to their calculated instances. So much like the Xianzhou Alliance, the Erudition story might be an episodic thing that will be fleshed out behind the scenes until we reach the most critical of Noose's instances. Now, these are the three paths that seem the most likely to be involved in something major in 4.0. Of course, I'm still biased and want to see elation be the main focus, but I could definitely see any of these other three taking the stage instead. Admittedly, it is quite early to be speculating on this particular topic. While there are hints here and there for each of these paths, they are far from concrete evidence and things might play out completely differently. Any of the paths, even those unplayable ones, could become the next focus, so take what I share here with a grain of salt. What path do you think the Trailblazer will unlock next, and what will be the next direction for the story? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you found the video entertaining, consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Thanks so much for watching, and as usual, have a nice day.